is fam- Everybody is familiar with the story of Adam and Eve. They're created in the Garden of Eden, and there is a particular tree in the Garden of Eden called the tree of the knowledge of good and evil that God tells them not to eat of. He says you can eat of any tree, but if you eat of that particular tree, then in the day that you eat of it, you will die, whatever that means.
So what that means is they did die. What happened was death entered the world. There was a relational death between their relationship with God. There was a spiritual death. And then there was the physical death where everything now dies because of that incident.
Here are some of the objections. The first thing is to say that it seems like if the serpent is lying and is evil and is the devil, then Eve is somehow deceived here. She's deceived by a half-truth. She's fooled into eating the fruit.
So this is exactly right. Eve was deceived. It says that in 2 Timothy 2:14.
And when she does so, not only is she punished for something which she was fooled into doing, but now her descendants are also punished for a crime that they did not commit, but rather one of their ancestors committed, and arguably didn't do so knowingly.
So there's some problems with this statement. To say that everyone is punished for Adam and Eve's sin is not the case. People are punished for their own sin. People sin against God on their own will and disobey on their own record. They're not punished for Adam and Eve's sins. They're punished for their own sins.
Not only that, but because she's eaten of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, this implies that before she ate of the tree, she didn't have a knowledge of good and evil.
So this is incorrect as well. I hear this one a lot, how, well, if they didn't know good and evil, actually they did know good and evil. God explicitly told them, hey, do not do that. That is wrong. Do not eat from the tree of good and evil. And they knew that. They had a mental understanding of good and evil. Now, what they didn't have was an experiential knowledge of good and evil. But make no mistake, Adam and Eve both knew that it was wrong to eat from the tree. They had that knowledge beforehand.
So if she's being punished for doing something evil and bad, then it seems incongruous that she would be punished for doing something evil and bad before she had a knowledge of what was evil and bad, because she hadn't eaten of the fruit yet. So again, it seems unfair to punish her for doing something that she can't have known was bad.
Again, Eve knew it was wrong and she was deceived. However, when it talks about the punishment when their eyes were opened, notice how it doesn't happen immediately after Eve eats the fruit. It's immediately after Adam eats the fruit. The whole Bible talks about how sin was brought in through Adam. Adam was not deceived. Adam disobeyed knowing that it was wrong. Interesting. The other thing to address here is the word unfair. It's like, what standard are you judging fairness by? Are you putting your own standard of fairness above God's? Because that's kind of the whole issue with the story of the God, Adam and Eve in the beginning, is that man wanted to decide for themselves what was good and evil, what's right and wrong, what's fair and unfair. That's the problem we've been having ever since then. So you can't tell God what is unfair based on what you think is unfair. That's not going to work.
The third question I would raise is why the serpent is there in the first place. If the serpent is this evil creature that's sort of crawling around Eden, why is the serpent in paradise in the first place? Why would God place him there? Why would God allow the serpent to be there?
So the first question I would ask would be, why does God owe you an explanation? If God is holy, we're sinful, and we've earned his judgment, why does he have to explain how and why he does everything? It might be that the creator of the universe maybe have a little bit more understanding than we do. The other thing to address here is the concept of good and evil. Why did God allow evil? Why did God allow the devil in the Garden of Eden? Well, ultimately, I don't think we can pinpoint an exact why, because God doesn't owe us that. However, I think if you look at the concept of free will, which, what does that even mean? Free will? God had to give humans an actual choice. There had to be an equal opposing choice and side where they could say no and choose their own way versus choose God's way. And that's the same thing we have today. Most of what the devil has is instant gratification. It's now, most of what God offers is delayed. However, that same choice has always existed for thousands of years. God doesn't want puppets. He wants us to choose him out of our own free will and volition. That's real love. If you found out that your wife or husband was paid to marry you, you probably would be upset. That's because that love wasn't a choice. But true love actually requires a choice. And for there to be a real choice, there has to be an equal opposing force inside to actually choose from. Otherwise, it's not a choice. It's like me giving you two glasses of water, filling one with pure water and the other one with mud, poo, and garbage, and saying, choose. I haven't really given you a choice at that point. So, same thing with this is God actually cares so much about our free will that he allowed Satan to enter the Garden of Eden. He allowed them to be tempted. He allowed them to fall so that we could actually choose him out of our own free will and love him out of a choice.
Fourthly, it's unclear what exactly is inaugurated by this event. We're told that original sin enters the world in this event. However, there must have already been something like a proneness to sinning with Adam and Eve, because at the very first opportunity they were given, they fell for it.
So it's actually very clear what happens. Sin enters the world, death enters the world is cursed, there's all this struggle. What was originally good is no longer good anymore, it's corrupted. That's what happened. That's pretty clear in the Bible. And no, sin did not exist. Everything was created perfectly. However, yes, God gave people the ability to choose against him, to disobey. Doesn't mean that there was sin. Just like today, we have the ability to choose not what God wants for us. We are tempted, but just because there's a temptation to do the wrong thing or to choose the wrong thing doesn't mean that there's sin. It just means that they're free will beings with the ability to choose God or to reject him.